What we want to talk about now is the movement from 300, Constantine, through the century of the 300s, during which the three great figures that I mentioned to you in the beginning of our evening, Augustine, Ambrose, and Jerome, are all born. Augustine has the longest life. Jerome is close. I think almost exactly the same. And Ambrose has a shorter life. But all three of them are contemporaries living through the second half of the 300s. All know each other, all are influencing the direction of Christianity. Now, the very first thing you would all realize is that the Edict of Milan, 313, changed everything for Christianity. Once the political state of the Christians in the empire changed from being secret underground criminals to being allowed legal public, then they had to begin to do the things that had never been required before. Get it? Think it through. Just think for a minute. If you're secret and you're underground, you're not publishing anything, you don't have a newspaper, you're not building anything, you're not out in front, you're not painting things out in front of anybody, you're not doing any of those things that we know a public movement does. But in 313, with toleration of the Constantine government, now every Christian, wherever they were, had to now begin to live in a public world. This meant immediately they could, would, and did build churches overnight, just from 313 to 323. So within 10 years, some of the oldest churches in the world, that is in the European world, are built because they're now permitted. And so some of the oldest dates, we think, some of the earliest churches are in the 300s. So Sant'Ambrogio, St. Ambrose, the Church of St. Ambrose we mentioned, in Milan, we think goes back to maybe the 320s. That would be the earliest church in Europe. Now, there'll be very quickly other ones. So there'll be churches in Rome, 330s, 340s, 350s. But this one may be one of the very earliest. And so that's the first thing. They were going to build churches. And when you build churches, then you bring in artists and you decorate the churches, right? Isn't that logical? And so that meant that you now had to begin to make choices about art. You had to begin to make choices about what you were going to put on the walls, what the subjects would be, how they would be done, and on and on and on. So you build churches, you decorate those churches, you hire sculptors, you hire painters, and you attempt to give voice. And think about it, almost immediately, you have to know what you believe, right? Right? All of a sudden, you're in public, and you now have to know what you believe. You have to know what the beliefs are. So the very immediate thing that came before the Christian community was to state what you believe, say what you believe, publish, that is, turn out books, write those books, circulate those books. And that's exactly what was happening. And the Council of Nicaea in 325, which Constantine sponsors, is the first great manifestation of that. In other words, Christians have to come together and agree what they believe. Now, they've always believed these things. It isn't they dream them up. Let me just take one example. Everybody always talks about the Trinity, and people write books to suggest that somehow the Council of Nicaea dreamed up the Trinity. Well, that's not true. It had always been there. That is the idea of it. It's there from the very beginning. There are three manifestations of the divine. There's the all-powerful Jewish God, the Creator, Yahweh. There's Jesus who comes down to earth, and there's the Holy Spirit. It had always been there, but it was now you had to explain it to people, and that's all different. And so from 325, 335 on, the church is in a huge debate about exactly how much power did God have, how much power did Jesus have, was Jesus there when God created the earth, on and on and on and on through hundreds and hundreds of questions. And so a huge debate breaks out in public in Constantinople, the new city that Constantine builds, Alexandria, and Rome, and Milan. So all during the 300s, these people have to think things through, write them down, publish books that have their conclusions, react to them, and of course, as I said, Jerome is in Jerusalem working, 390 to 400, on a new Latin translation. A huge project, imagine, a whole Bible, translating it all from original documents, Greek documents that he could get access to in Jerusalem, into Latin. And of course, that's the Latin Bible that lasts for 1,000 years. So, the important thing for us here tonight is Augustine and the Confessions, and Augustine as a person, Augustine as an influence. On the screen, we have Augustine's Confessions outlined, and it's essentially autobiography. It's essentially Augustine telling us what happened. Now, he writes it as if it's a confession to God. So the language is filled with, well, dear Lord, I did this, and dear Lord, I did that, and forgive me for my sins, etc., etc., etc. But in addition to the dear Lords here and there, is a intimate, extraordinarily revealing document like none other ever in history. Ever. Anywhere. Not anywhere else in Europe, not anywhere else in the empire, not anywhere else in Roman literature, not anywhere in Greek literature, not anywhere in Egyptian literature, Indian literature, Chinese literature, African literature, penguin literature. There's no anything like this anywhere. Patagonia, I could have said Patagonia. There's no other document like this. What do I mean? Well, the willingness to tell you about what he's done in his life. He's just being so extraordinarily honest and revealing because he thinks he should. He thinks that's part of being a good person, is to be able to confront your life and your past. Now think about it in our own society, and think about how much we would accept that, how much we would agree that that's exactly right. I mean, it's all part of the whole 20th century psychiatry and psychoanalysis and Freud and Jung and Jung and old Jung and all the in-between Jung and all the Jung. Every self-help, every KQED program that's ever been broadcast, every one of them, they always tell you, right, isn't this true? Know yourself, right? Know yourself. Know yourself. Socrates said, know thyself. Okay, so here we have then an example in Western literature of someone who's saying, okay, we're all saying we should know ourselves, so let's do it. Let's write it down and share it with people. And of course, that's what he does here. So we have book 1 on the early years. Book 2 is adolescence. Book 3, he's a student at Carthage. Book 4, he's in the Manichaean movement. Book 5, he goes to Rome. Book 5, he's in both Rome and Milan. Book 6, his conflicts in Milan. Book 7, his studies with Plato and Neoplatonism. Book 8, his conversion. It's a spectacular section of the book. I mean, I just tell you, when you're in Milan and you think of this, it's really wonderful to be in that cathedral of Milan. And then book 9, the death of his mother, and book 10 and 11 on 2 themes, memory and time. So what we have then is an autobiography, the Confessions, and this introduces us to this moment in Christianity, circa 400, when its greatest theologian, I think everybody would agree with that in the whole history, 2,000 years, this is the single greatest religious thinker of all time. The reason he's so important is that his writing and his thinking at the year 400 comes right at the moment when Christians will need someone great to give them material to think about, because they're now entering 1,000 years from 400 to 1400 when there will be no possible successor at his level. Why? Because he's the last generation that can be in touch directly with Greece. After him, Greek is going to disappear in Europe. People don't know Greek anymore after 400. And so after that, there's no possibility that anyone will know Aristotle directly in the West. So it's 1,000 years before that can be true again. Is everybody with me here? Everybody knows this, right? So it's the Renaissance, and it's Renaissance Florence when you get the first people who will learn Greek all over again after the 1,000-year interval, and then once again be able to go back and reattach to Greek thought like they had been able to do. So Augustine stands at this unique bridge, this unique gate, and he stands at that moment as the last titan of ancient knowledge before Greek disappears. And so there can't be anybody as great as he is in that next 1,000 years. So he's the one. He's the one. He creates medieval philosophy. He creates medieval theology. He creates the literature. So where does Dante start? Augustine. So you see, it's 1,000 years that this man dominates the entire European Christian world of thought. 354 to 430. And during that 76 years, he and his generation experience the invasions of the barbarians, meaning that he and his generation now are the first generation to experience severe barbarian breaching of the walls, invasions, destruction of cities, and most important of all, in 410, the sack of Rome. And in 410, the sack of Rome is the most devastating thing that anyone has ever seen in the ancient world. And for them, in the year 410, it means the end of Rome. To them, it means Rome is about to collapse. And that's his experience, and Ambrose and Jerome, that's their experience at around 400. So that's part of the picture here, from 300 to 400, at the peak with Constantine at around 300, and then by 400, someone like Augustine experiences this.